Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Not Your Average Josh, back here for another video for you. And today I'm doing something a little bit different, something I haven't tried yet. This year I'm going to be doing several different movie series as different films come out this year. There's a lot of sequels, remakes, whatever you want to call reboots coming out this year. And I am going to be delving into some of these franchises. Indiana Jones is one. I haven't seen the original 3 Indiana Jones movies since I was a kid. Mission Impossible movies, I actually, believe it or not, have never seen any of the Mission Impossible movies, or if I did, I was way too young to remember any of it. Obviously, I know some of the moments, the huge stunts that Tom Cruise does in each movie, but I've never watched any of the movies all the way through, so I'll be doing that as well. The Fast and Furious movies. I have seen the first 4 Fast and Furious movies, but I have never actually watched all the way through any of the Fast movies from 5 on. So that'll be a lot of fun. Basically all the ridiculous ones, all the crazy ones will be fun to get into and give my review on that. But I'll be reviewing all those movies. Hopefully get through all of them leading up about a month from now to when Fast 10 comes out. And I will do that review when it comes out, of course. And there's also some various other movies that I will be reviewing leading up to certain films that come out. I'm going to be experimenting with that throughout this year, see how much of it I can do. Hopefully I can get through a lot of them. But today I am starting out with this first movie series I'll be doing, and that is going to be the first 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, of course, comes out in about a month on May 5th. It's been a while since I had revisited these movies, definitely a few years for the second one, and even more than that for the first one. Before I get into my review of the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I do want to say hit that like button, leave a comment as well. I appreciate any thoughts anybody has. You can also hit that subscribe button if this is your first time watching any of my videos, or if you're a returning person watching any of my videos, that is very much appreciated, all the support I can give. You can also follow me on TikTok. You can add me on Snapchat, where I will post content similar to this, but for the most part, my content will be here on this YouTube channel, Not Your Average Josh. So again, I appreciate all the continued support, but let's get into this review of Guardians of the Galaxy. If you don't know, Guardians of the Galaxy came out in 2014, and this movie was really the first MCU movie that really introduces the audience to the galaxy abroad. Besides being on Earth, of course, the first phase is dealing all on Earth, and then of course culminated in the Avengers movie, the first Avengers movie that was obviously very positively received. I remember seeing the first Avengers movie, still remember that day with my friend. There was only 2 seats left. The Cinemark that I actually went to, I don't even think they were reserving seats yet at this point, 2012 when it came out, and there was only 2 seats left on the very front row. We were seeing it in 3D as well, but I still remember having such a good time with that movie, even though, of course, being on the front row, the 3D is just not going to be as good. So this Guardians of the Galaxy movie coming out a couple of years later, as I said, the first real introduction into the galaxy, not being on Earth, completely removing from all the characters that we had been introduced to so far in the MCU. A real chance, honestly, if you look at it, going back in time for Marvel, in terms of, the success was building, just having James Gunn come in, still, obviously not as known as he is now, running DC and everything. This whole new set of characters that we're getting introduced to in this movie, having to bring that together, these characters that don't know each other at the beginning of this movie, to be able to make it feel so seamless and natural for them to come together and for this movie to be such a hit, was just, I think, such a catapult for Marvel and the MCU as a whole to go further on to other things like bringing in smaller characters like Ant-Man.
We'll have so much ice cream, we'll never stop puking.
The fact that this first Guardians movie was so successful really just opened the door for so many different ideas to come in and different chances for Marvel to take. And you could say that that has a lot to do with the mediocrity, I guess you'll say, of what Phase 4 was. I think the real difference between this first Guardians movie and the Phase 4 movies is just the execution overall. The Eternals, you were introduced to those characters in that movie as well. I think the difference was that this first Guardians movie, especially after rewatching it last night, I think this movie is definitely one of the best Marvel movies. My perception really of the 2 Guardians movies, I like them both on a pretty even level. I know most people will say that the second Guardians of the Galaxy is on a lower scale, lower level than the first one. I always kind of like them both pretty equally. But after watching this first one, and again, I have to watch the second one again, but as I said, I think this first Guardians movie is a great movie. Not even for Marvel or for comic book movies. I think this is just a great movie, much like I think that the first Black Panther movie is a great movie. The balance of humor in this with the serious emotional moments in this movie it was just so well done. It was definitely comparable to a Thor Ragnarok that came out later, but honestly, I think this was even more perfect than Thor Ragnarok, even less jokey, but all the jokes that were put in this movie, all the humorous moments, they felt very appropriate. None of it felt out of place. There's only really a couple times in watching it again where I thought the jokes were a little cheesy, maybe a little too much, but overall, none of it ever felt out of place. All the emotional moments hit more than they ever have, to be honest, after watching this again. I think especially after, as I said, watching seeing the Phase 4 play out, really the disappointment that I had with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, it was honestly a refresher just to see this movie and get a reminder of, oh, they can do something different and branch out, and as it's all about the execution, really, because that's the biggest thing. If Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania had been executed much better, the story had been less messy, it would have been more widely received. It wasn't the fact that it was so different, we're going to this quantum realm. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy, as I said, it's really the first time we're outside of Earth, and we spend the whole time on a completely different planet, dealing with different type of people, different type of government, different authority, and these different heroes that come together are really criminals at the beginning. Of course, a perfect idea for James Gunn to take over, and seeing, of course, what he did with Suicide Squad. He's just great with a ragtag group of characters that are a little bit criminal-like, and of course in Suicide Squad, straight up criminals, and bringing them together to make them either anti-heroes or straight up heroes. I have not enjoyed this movie more than I did watching it this time. Of course, Chris Pratt as Peter Quill, I think, is one of the best castings in the MCU. He is just, to me, embodies the characters so well, and I'm a person who has not delved into the comics that much, so I can't speak really from that perspective. Pratt knows the right tone to speak with the certain humorous moments, and then also really show that emotion in this movie. Of course, we don't go into his backstory as much as we do in the second one, but watching this again, there's a lot of things I did notice, like dropping the little breadcrumbs for what is to come in the second movie and future movies about his dad, of course, and then his mom at the beginning of this movie. Just the way this opens up with his mom dying of cancer. A really emotional moment. Like, I remember the moment, of course, from watching it before, but it really is a truly emotional moment to start with the movie. And then you go right from that to him, of course, being kidnapped by Yondu and his men. And then now he's older, and you get this whole sequence, of course, with him jumping through this, what was it, Morag, going to steal the orb, of course, that has the Infinity Stone or the Power Stone, I believe it is. The MacGuffin, really, in this movie is this orb. The way they bring in Thanos in this movie, I thought was, upon rewatch again, it was just so brilliant. After seeing, of course, where Thanos goes, leading into Endgame, after seeing that whole roadmap play out, it was really nice to watch this again and recognize how they really could have brought Thanos in at the end of this movie. Because Ronan, of course, and I haven't mentioned it, but I pretty much assume if you're watching this, you probably have seen it, or you either just don't care at this point about spoilers. So this is going to be pretty spoiler heavy if you haven't already gotten that. But you have the moment in this movie where Ronan betrays Thanos and, of course, can't help but be overcome with the power of this Infinity Stone and takes it into his own hands to try and take down Xandar. And in that moment, they easily could have had Thanos show the fuck up in this movie in Act 3 and take down Ronan and really arrive in the MCU as a powerful presence. But they did a really good thing. They showed a lot of restraint, which I think they might have been lacking, or might be lacking, in Kang in terms of these next phases in the MCU. I will say, as much as I like Kang and Jonathan Majors, of course, with everything going on, we'll see how that all plays out. But I thought they really brought Thanos along at such a nice pace leading into Infinity War and Endgame, where he really could shine, and he's in those movies so much. I thought it was a great show of restraint to not have him show up at the end of this movie. The last image we see is of him on the screen there as Ronan saying, fuck you, after I kill these people, I'm going to come after you. You get enough of the presence of Thanos to realize that he is a powerful presence, or to get that feeling that he is. Of course, we haven't seen him do any real action yet, but I just thought it was really nice. He was in this movie enough. We get the whole scene where Ronan goes to talk to him in person. I thought that was all we needed, because we're going to be getting them in future movies at this point. Ronan as a whole, as the villain, I always had a memory of him being pretty mediocre, to be honest. I actually liked Ronan in this more than I have ever before. He was actually pretty menacing through some moments in this movie. The moment where he takes down Dave Bautista and throws him in that vat of yellow liquid, whatever that is, he really does show his power in this movie. Of course, he's not like Thanos. He does have some strength about him, and the way he shoves Bautista and just throws him against the wall, you could tell he's not to be fucked with. You know, he's not just some weak ass villain. Of course, he does say some cliche lines and whatnot, and there really is no personal drive for him. He really is just he can't. He's overcome by the power. So and he does have this. They do kind of touch on his qualm with the people of Xandar, but they don't really go into it too much. So in the end, it really is a typical villain narrative or story arc, I guess you will say. But I thought it was actually pretty cool, more cool than I remember. This movie is just so well structured. From the first act, where basically, I don't know where the actual line, the cutoff is, but the first act to me ending in that prison break scene, and then all the way to the third act of this movie, I think this movie is structured so well, where you have at the beginning of this movie, these characters all being separate apart. Chris Pratt's doing his own thing. You have Groot and Rocket doing their own thing, collecting bounties and whatnot. Gamora, of course, working with Thanos, and then you learn more about her backstory. Of course, Thanos killing her parents and then taking her in as his new daughter, if you will, even though she obviously doesn't want that, in the process of betraying Thanos and Ronan. And Dave Bautista's character, too, honestly, I didn't remember him having so much emotional moments in this movie as well. Not that he has a ton, but he was actually better than I remembered in this movie as well. A lot of topic of discussion in the memory for me of Dave Bautista's character, Drax, was that he was all right in this first one, but he really came into his own through the second Guardians and the Avengers movies. But I think really from the beginning here, he is a pretty strong character. They really don't touch on too much. Same with kind of Rocket in this movie of their backstory, but you can tell there is a hurt and a baggage that they carry with how they came to be. With Drax, you have Thanos having killed his family, and then Rocket, that brief mention when they're in nowhere and they're having that argument when they're waiting for the collector to talk to them. You have this moment where Rocket is yelling at Drax. They're having this argument saying he didn't choose to be this way. He didn't choose to be experimented on. And I like how they leave those little breadcrumbs to what is going to eventually be played out in this new Guardians movie. There was a few moments where I really noticed some Easter egg breadcrumbs that are left for future movies just in this first movie, which I thought was brilliant in the way that they're playing it out now. Like Cosmo showing up. I forgot that he was in this first one as a collection, technically, I guess, by the collector. And it was also really cool to see Groot in this movie. I didn't remember him actually being Big Groot for basically the whole movie in this. I actually, for some reason, remembered him dying or getting destroyed early on and then being that little Groot for this one. But I guess it goes into the second one where he's little and he continues to grow at that point. It was really cool to see his big adult version of Groot, you know, with the deep voice and everything, and to see his powers fully play out in that version in this. Bradley Cooper, man. And Rocket in general, I think as like in this movie, he like especially the effects, it looks really good still, even though you know it wasn't that long ago, 9 years ago, but still, the effects look so good with Rocket, and I thought he's honestly been one of the best utilized characters in the MCU as a whole. From his introduction in this first Guardians movie, through the second Guardians movie, through the Avengers movies, he's always been utilized so well, and he had some emotional moments in this as well. Like that moment at the end of this movie. Just such a great third act, like this battle scene. There's so many times throughout this movie where I got vibes of Star Wars and Star Trek. Of course, with the Nova Corps, that's really where I kind of got the Star Trek vibes. And then the battles in the sky, especially at the end, this third act huge battle with ships and everything. It just felt so like, again, like Star Wars to me. I just thought this movie had the fun, it had the heart. It's somehow, with all these characters being introduced to, even the people of the Nova Corps, like John C. Reilly, I thought he played such a perfect character that I thought fit him as an actor, but also had, you know, wasn't completely goofy over the top. None of this movie was. That's what I think caught me so surprised, really, because I didn't remember how well balanced the humor and the seriousness in this movie was. It really is perfect, like for a movie like this. James Gunn he just killed it in all the writing. He's listed as James Gunn, of course, listed as the main writer for this movie, as well as being the director. But there's also, I think, 10 other people that are credited for the writing, whether they worked on the comics or were involved in the writing room in this. It was such a nice setup for these characters as well, leading into the second one at the end of this movie. Even within this battle, there's some death that takes place. You have a lot of the Nova Corps people die. At one point, Ronan's people are dive bombing the city that they're in, Xandar. And there's really a really, you feel the death and the actual danger going on. It really does. It really did grip me. Um, in a way where you feel like all the characters are potentially in danger here. Zoe Saldana as Gamora in this movie, I thought she was such a perfect, I think, casting at this point, looking back on it as this character. And then her and Star-Lord's connection that they build in this movie also felt very natural. A lot of times in these movies, you feel like, oh, of course they're going to go for this romantic relationship now, but I thought it really built naturally in this. It didn't feel like it was pushed or forced. Gamora was still standoffish. They had that moment, where, of course, where they're about to kiss, and she was still kind of standoffish. She does not like this all of a sudden, oh, I'm so into you, Star-Lord. Like, she still has what makes Gamora Gamora. She's a fighter. She's a warrior. She's gone through a lot of shit, losing her family, having to deal with Thanos all these years. It made sense that she wouldn't just be all of a sudden head over heels over him. So I thought that worked very naturally. And then, of course, Michael Rooker as Yondu in this. Something I didn't remember is how really little he is used in this movie. Star-Lord being on the run from Yondu for a majority of this. Again, everyone really trying to go after this orb with this Infinity Stone in it. Really the MacGuffin of this movie. I always had consideration for it because it had been a while since I'd seen this movie. So anytime I did think about it, I was like, well, I need to revisit it again because I do remember it being really good. But after watching this again, this is a great movie. I think just James Gunn, you can see after this movie why he really burst onto the scene and why he is running DC now, why he's a good pick for that, especially for certain characters within the comic book realm. He knew the pulse of this movie, what feel he wanted to give it. The soundtrack of this movie, of course, is very nice with the Walkman Peter's always going around with, and then of course how they bring it in at the end where he finally opens that present his mom gave him years ago in 1988, the Awesome Mix Volume 2. They really tied everything up so well in this. It all felt like they really honed down and put together a very good script and screenplay for this, to where they just kind of rolled right through it. A good blueprint for what they can do. Not to copy what they did in Guardians, to know that if you have the execution well and you get a good story down, then focus on all the fantastical elements and the cool stuff about it. But you need to get a good story down. That's what I think Marvel needs to refocus on and make sure they're doing well, because in the end, if you don't have a good story, you're going to continue to have people lose faith in your stuff. Down to the casting, the screenplay, the effects still look really good. Of course, not too long ago, only about 9-10 years, but it looks really good. There was only a couple moments in this movie where the effects are noticeably fake, if you will. Like, you notice it in the moment we're watching it. But for the most part, like, as much, there really is a pretty good amount of effects in this movie. The planets we go to, it all worked really well, and again, something that Marvel can look to. It did a nice mixing of effects in this movie where it didn't feel like it was CGI overload. You know, it didn't feel like it was something that we're just being pounded with CGI like in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. These all felt like tangible places, like real planets that we're going to. I think that is very important to note, I believe. Great execution from top to bottom with this movie. I'm going to give Guardians of the Galaxy, that's right, a 10 out of 10. I'm just as shocked as I'm sure anybody that's watching this might be. I never had this high on my rating at all for Marvel, but having watched it again, I just think the execution, the pacing, the fact that all the action scenes in this movie were very entertaining. They all felt consequential to the story as well. And just overall, the directing, the writing, the screenplay, everything just felt so right with this movie, and it felt like a lightning in the bottle moment. All the emotion worked for me, the way the characters come together. It all felt very warranted and very natural. Just enjoy every moment of this movie. And I think this is peak Marvel for me. But what do you guys think? Are the Guardians movies maybe not as high on the list as it is for me? Probably not, I'm sure. Is it more in the middle for you? Do you not like the Guardians movies? Or are you a big fan of the franchise? What do you think? I love hearing any feedback, any comments. Hit that like button as well. If this is your first time watching any of my videos, you can also hit that subscribe button. Or if you are returning and you've seen my videos before, you can also hit that subscribe button as well. Any support is appreciated. You can also follow me on TikTok and add me on Snapchat, where I'll post content similar to this. But for the most part, my content will be here on this YouTube channel, Not Your Average Josh. Be looking for more videos very soon. I will be coming out with this review of the second Guardians movie this week. Also, I'm going to be seeing the Super Mario Brothers movie. I'm pretty excited for that. The movie Air, I'm excited for as well. Hearing great reactions and reviews coming out about that. I appreciate anyone who's watching. I'll talk to you guys later.